a great pleasure to have Beverley Jacobson here, Dr. Beverley Jacobson here, to talk to us tonight. The reason why I asked her was because I'd heard about some of her experiences in COVID-19, but also about the background of her experiences with part of the community, the Jewish and the wider community, that don't normally get a public hearing, even amongst groups of doctors. I was trying to summarize what to say about her. She's, as you might have gathered from her accent and my accent, we're ex-South Africans. And I think that when the history of Anglo Jewry is written of what happened between, say, 1970 and 2020 or 2040, I think that Beverley's contribution will stand out amongst those of other South African immigrants and of other South African immigrant doctors in particular, for the kinds of things she's done, and she's contributed to the Anglo-Jewish community since she's been here. So, Beverley, carry on.
Well, thank you. I'm really flattered, and thank you for that very kind and generous introduction. I see a lot of what I do for myself as much as I do for others. So, but I thought the title of tonight's talk is The Art of the Possible. And I think it's because I wanted to share my kind of what's taken me into the world that I work in today, and the kind of obstacles I've come up against, and the things, and they help me to do the work that I do today. So that was really, I was trying to give a sense of the journey. So I think that as you get older, you start to learn that life is just full of challenges. You know, we all deal with them in one way or another. They're the kind of things that just fill the room, you know, that you're in, and there's no perspective about how they compare with one another. Mostly you don't really know the reason why you're facing a challenge. Often very young people are, have enormous pain, and you can sit and question and ask why. It doesn't really help, and you have to believe, if you believe in God, you have to believe that everything happens for a reason. In most people's lives, you never get to understand the reason, to lose you in the world as you live. I feel kind of that I'm very lucky, because although my life's had some challenges, I've been able to find reason through them. So as David said, I grew up in South Africa, and my father was a well-known general practitioner in Johannesburg, and I spent my whole childhood from a very, very young age sort of tailing around behind him, going on house calls as one did in those days. And he was my idol, and all I wanted to do was emulate my father and help save the world. And so there was no question I would do anything other than study medicine. And so I went on to study medicine at Wits, and halfway through my medical studies, I met the man of my dreams and was married at a young age. And then after I graduated, I had just started on a pediatric rotation. And as part of our training responsibilities, we had to cover the A&E every so often. And that was, I guess, the first challenge of my life, because I was on call one night, and it was already about 10 to 2 in the morning when a man came in with asthma. And I was working then at the Hillbrow Hospital, which was designated a black hospital at the time, which meant that although it was in the middle of Johannesburg, everything about it, all the things around were third world kind of standards. So we used to dispose of needles into empty Coke bottles, empty 2-liter Coke bottles that were hung next to each bed. And after I'd done a blood gas on this man who was very well known to the hospital, and he had, from his asthma, and also he actually had a broken leg at the time. So because it was pre-digital days, he didn't have a file with him. He had a temporary file, and I took the blood gas and was trying to get butterfly needle into the 1.5 centimeter sized lid of the Coke bottle, and just as I was trying to do it, I nicked my finger with the needle, only to discover the following morning that, in fact, this man was well known in the hospital, and he had full-blown AIDS. I mean, in the early 90s, you will remember that people didn't really understand the trajectory of the HIV virus, other than it went on to AIDS, and most likely was terminal. So as a very young, newly married woman, I was obviously thrown into a terrible spin, completely devastated by that experience, and had very little support around me. The seroconversion, although it was likely that it was would happen immediately, there was always a chance that you could seroconvert within an 18-month period. So it was a very, very difficult time. I was lucky enough to be able to get access to AZT, and went on to AZT for that whole period, taking it every 4 hours through the night even, and then having to have weekly blood tests to make sure there was no liver suppression, etc. And eventually it just got the better of me, and I decided that I just needed some time out. And that was when my husband and I decided to come to London, and I did an MBA at the London Business School. I didn't really think at the time I was leaving medicine. It was just an opportunity to have a different education and a different experience that took me there. When I finished my MBA, I had lots of offers. Healthcare consulting was the flavor of the month, so I got lots of job offers from management consulting firms. And even though I'd had the fright of everything before, I was flying again. I'm very excited. And the most exciting thing was that just after I'd started my first job, I was pregnant after 6 years of marriage with our eldest daughter, Talia, who actually was born on Erev Yom Kippur of 1994. And we were trying very hard to get home from, it was a absolutely normal pregnancy and birth, and we were trying very hard to get home from the hospital in time for the fast, when it became apparent that my daughter just wasn't settling. And so my mum, who was with me at the time, asked the registrar on call just to check her before we left the hospital. We'd been discharged and everything. And they said they found that she was pyrexial at the time, and they said we weren't going anywhere. And actually, they put her straight into SCBU with on IV antibiotics. And lo and behold, I had a Group B strep infection. And within a couple of hours, Talia was fighting for her life, and almost simultaneous with the timing of what would have been called Nidre prayers. So we walked into the special care unit to see 6 doctors surrounding her little cot, and the lead doctor actually came out and asked me if I wanted to baptize her, because they didn't think she was going to make it. They resuscitated Talia. She was on transferred. She was on life support, transferred to Great Ormond Street for 5 days, and then back at Edgware Hospital, and back home within 3 weeks after that. We obviously, the closer Group B strep occurs to birth, the more fatal it is. We were very lucky she survived. I chose to believe that everything was going to be all right, and that first year of her life was an extremely difficult one, because she just literally screamed for 24 hours of every day. The only thing, though, was that she was feeding nicely and growing nicely, and so I still was in an enormous kind of denial that everything was going to be okay. It was only when she was 8 months old that we started to really realize that things weren't going quite according to plan. And she had an MRI done at that point in time, and it showed that she had very extensive brain damage, that just about every lobe had been affected. And so we were told then that we should really expect the least from our daughter, that it was unlikely that she would be able to have a life where she communicated with us or was active. The prognosis was very, very poor that was given to us. So it was a really hard time. Until that point in time, I think I actually managed really well, because when you've got hope, you can do anything. That day when we were given that diagnosis, the hope was dashed, and it felt like you were falling into a hole that you really couldn't get out of. And we didn't have our family around to support us either, which made it doubly difficult. In fact, we had just prior to her birth moved into a new area, thinking that we would make friends through the birth of a child in a new community. And nothing could have been further from the truth, because it was such an alienating experience. Tali was a very frustrated child. She just it was all that, like, she couldn't express herself, and we couldn't help her. Everything we seemed to do for her seemed to irritate her more than like all the things that you intuitively do with a little baby that's disturbed, kind of rock them or stroke them. What we learned afterwards is that she was incredibly sensory defensive. So everything we were trying to do just to nurture her and mother her, actually set her off, which was really difficult. It took her till she was about when she even sort of 2 or 3 years old, there were still times when we weren't sure that she could understand anything that was happening around her. That's how poor her understanding was. But she was always had a lot of energy in her, and was always like trying to move and trying to do things, which was hard to manage, but I think was her saving grace. And when she was about 7 or 8, she started to walk independently, and she also started to communicate, which was I think the real savior, because from that time on, our lives got much easier, because she was a much happier person, because we were able to meet her needs, which was the difference. And she's the most incredible child. She's 26 today, and she has just completely I think exceeded every single person's expectation of her. She's got cerebral palsy, which affects all 4 of her limbs. She's quite clearly, got very obvious disabilities when you meet her. She's very severely visually impaired, and walks about with a cane. She has epilepsy as well, and she's got learning difficulties. So she's got lots of complex needs, but she's determined beyond words. She's resilient beyond words. She's got a lovely, warm personality, and she's funny. She's completely honest, which is absolutely endearing, and that helps her, breaks down barriers between people, which has been one of the most refreshing things that I've learned from her. So when she started senior school, and when my youngest started school, at that point I was desperate to get back into the workforce. I did attempt to get back into medicine originally, because I wanted to actually get away from this world of special needs, which had completely overtaken my life, and landed up working for a while as a GP, and getting asked to write letters for people that had special needs children who wanted sort of medical evidence to take to tribunals when they were fighting their children's case. So I sort of found myself getting dragged back into the world of special needs. And it was sort of at that time that I saw a job advertised at Kisharon, which I applied for. And the thing that always astounded me in my experience with Tali was that the help when it came always came from the most unsuspecting of places. And I was always amazed at how many people went out of their way every day to help her. You know, I can understand as a parent why one does what one does for a child like my daughter, because it's just this unconditional love that takes you over. But when you see people who are not associated with her giving to that degree, especially when the reward is often not comparable with the amount you put in, then it's just mind-blowing, you know. And it was that really inspired me to want to give back. And when I came to work in special needs, what took me by surprise was just how positive the view was of disability, far more ambitious than my own had been. And there were so many people who subscribed to the belief that every individual is really created in the image of God, and really has their own inherent value and can contribute equally to the world around them. And it was, my mind was blown by that, you know, because suddenly I realized that the expectations on me were different from how I had expected them to be. It was rather than sort of helping individuals languish through their struggles, you know. And you know, I kind of saw my goal as being there to remove the barriers of the strife, and really to provide opportunities for them to contribute to the world. And you know, and that was what like kind of ignited my my quest, really, you know, to support individuals with learning disabilities. The other thing it did for me was that same hope that got squashed when Tali was you know, 8 months old, when we got her diagnosis, was suddenly reignited. And for the first time I could start imagining and dreaming about her future, because until that time I couldn't even deal with the concept of what a future could be like for her. So you know, for me, what I've learned about the world of special needs is really that that every individual is different, and people do have real talents and gifts to give to those around them. It's just about finding them and facilitating their ability to be able to do that. It takes the right support, but really with the right support, I really believe that people with learning disabilities have you know, can achieve enormous amounts. You know, it's about how much ambition we have for them, you know. And my kind of drive is to see people achieve independence and enjoy life, be included in communities, and you know, find ways that they can take part in vocation and really develop you know, fulfilling lives around that. And I guess so after 10 years at Kisharon, I was very privileged to be appointed as the chief executive of Norwood. And for me, that was a whole circle coming around, because it was, in fact, when Tali was about 13 months old, when I was probably in the depths of my despair, one of my somebody I knew came and said to me, had I heard of Norwood, I should go to them for help. And it was actually Norwood runs a group called the Rainbow Group, which is for parents of special needs children. And it was there that I sort of found my solace. You know, I found people who were going through the same emotions I was. And even today, all these years later, that same group of people still get together and support each other. Our children have all developed very differently, because you know, the span of problems was huge amongst our group, but yet we always held the same things in common, that we were people struggling with our lives and struggling to fit in. And I guess for all of us, what happens is that you know, the lives with somebody with learning disabilities goes through peaks and troughs. There's sometimes where everything is plain sailing, but every time you have a period of transition or circumstances change, things go a bit haywire. And it's always great to find people who've been through that before you that can help you, get through it. So, that's been really helpful. So, I kind of think that a lot of what I've learned in my life is about a mindset. It's about taking, you can't change what happens to you, but you can change the way you react to them. Somebody said that you can't, I think it was there was an actor, Jimmy Dean, who's got a famous saying that you can't change the way the wind blows, but you can sort of move your sails so you can still get to your destination. That sort of concept. Those aren't exact words. And that's been the thing that's always, my life. I always wanted to be a doctor. My life just took such different. It took me on. I kept getting onto these waves that kind of surfed me into a different place. I didn't land up where I wanted to go. It's been quite interesting. There's a brilliant book called Upside of Stress by the psychologist Kelly McGonigal, and she talks about it because she in it they talk about how you can see stress as a positive rather than a negative, and almost and there's some studies that were done in Harvard about how when you have the stress effect, what happens is your heart rate goes up, but you can actually control your thoughts. And either in this review, they were talking about how you can control whether your arteries actually constrict or don't, and that actually changes the way you respond to things, and you can learn to control that. I haven't got that good at things, but I do think that by having the right approach to things, you can really manage a lot. And I mean, the greatest part of working in the area that I do is that you see it on a everyday level. You see people are kind of taking themselves outside their comfort zone and doing amazing things. And this year in particular has been a very interesting one, working in a care organization. I mean, if you would have told me a year ago that we would have coped with people with really challenging behavior and very need for structured activity in their life, being restricted by lockdown in homes, and all the structure of their day falling out. Also, having to learn to cope wearing masks with other people wearing masks, all the PPE around them. I wouldn't, with the degree of challenge that we deal, I wouldn't have believed for 1 minute that it would have been possible. But people have been absolutely fantastic. I mean, there've been amazing stories. The most exciting day I had was so one of the interesting things about the year is actually that my GMC license, which when all the revalidation came about 4 years ago, I put myself on the non-practicing register because it was getting too much bother to keep the validation up to date. And over COVID, my license was reinstated. So one of the things I've enjoyed most about this year is having had the ability to go and vaccinate in my free time when I get it, which has been really enjoyable. I think it's probably the nicest thing that medicine holds, because you never come across more grateful people in your whole life, as come, and also you don't have to deal with the consequences of having given them the jab, so you never know whether they reacted to it or not. It's you just get the joy of giving it to them. I always come home feeling very blessed after a vaccination session, because everybody's telling me what an angel I am. But the best day I had at Norwood was when we went to we struggled to get vaccinations out at Ravenswood. We just couldn't get them on time, and I was the day we got them there, they came on at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And they had to vaccinate 70 people on the village site. And these were 70 very difficult people who I thought we would actually have to sedate some of them to manage to vaccinate them, because they were so uptight. And what was amazing is that we managed to vaccinate all 70 people within about a 2.5-hour period. And that was because the people who came onto the site had all the vaccines all drawn up before they got there. Our staff had got all the paperwork in place, which was a whole how do you do with mental capacity assessments and best interest assessments and whatnot. And our people had also had so much practice with social stories and things that they were almost standing there with their shirt sleeves rolled up waiting for the vaccines, which was again a remarkable experience to see, people that just exceeding expection again. In terms of COVID in our care homes, we at Norwood had a fantastic run until December of last year. We were very quick in putting together a COVID action group, which from meets every morning at 11 o'clock and can actually track what's going on in all our homes from a supply point of view, from food supplies, medicine supplies, staff numbers, the incidence of people who've been infected, like whatever. And we were able to isolate people very easily. We had a very, very good system in place. Unfortunately, in November, we had started testing staff ahead of coming on shift. And suddenly we picked up that a number of our staff were showing up asymptomatic, but were actually COVID carriers. And by the time we picked it up, it was already well embedded in the homes. And somehow something was a bit different about the contagiousness of that variant of the virus, because no matter how hard we tried to isolate it, we couldn't. And over the New Year weekend, we had 25% of the people in the village that were actually the people we look after who were COVID positive, and our staff numbers were down 33%, partly from self-isolation and partly from people who had COVID as well. So it was an incredibly difficult period. The hardest part of all was that we started to realize that our cohort of people didn't show symptoms in the same way that the general population did, or maybe they weren't able to express it. And we had a tragic incident where one young man literally was walking to his bed, seemed asymptomatic, and he collapsed and died. And when the paramedics came, they said that his lungs were absolutely filled with fluid. And they were quite shocked, actually, that he showed no symptoms. And so from then on, we started using oximeters and testing all the people 3 times a day at least, just to get their oxygen levels. And as soon as they were dropped below 92%, then we'd call the paramedics into the village to come and help. And that really that saved a lot of lives, because we were able to get medical help on time and oxygen on time, and things started to reverse from then. And fortunately, we've turned the corner. We've managed miraculously to get. We've got about 83% of our staff vaccinated, which is very high in the care world. And that was through a lot of huge active intervention. There was there's swathes of people within our staff cohort that were really anti getting vaccinated, and we had to work very hard to kind of undo the myths that they were believing, and really try and convince them that it was a good thing to do. And so, I'm optimistic for the future. So that's really my story. One of the things to end off with, the thing that starts my everyday is that when my daughter was 12, we decided, we didn't know what we were going to do for bat mitzvah. It didn't really seem like something that was important to her, but I did try and find somebody to give her some bat mitzvah lessons, and the woman, I'll never forget, she asked her in the first bat mitzvah lesson, do you want to learn about marriage or Brit Milah or something like, and I thought, oh my God, this woman's off her tree. It's like my daughter didn't understand simple things, but somehow she managed to teach my daughter, expose her to things that she wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to. And what she did give her was my daughter's very black and white, so Judaism is absolutely brilliant for her, because the structure of everything about Judaism is very black and white. And so for a while, she was teaching her every bracha in town, and we were having to say it over everything. Some of those have slipped away, but some she's retained. And one of the things that she's done every day since she had her bat mitzvah lessons was that she wakes up every single morning and she goes to the sink to wash her hands. And I even remember her once having had an epileptic fit in the middle of the night, and she had gone into status, and we had to call the ambulance out to come and give her some IV medication to settle her. And they told me if I was worried, I was to bring her to hospital, because they weren't sure how long she had been in status for. And I had just gone to sleep when I heard this noise in the house, and I immediately thought something had happened to my daughter. But all she was doing was her morning ritual of going to the sink, and she stood there and she washed her hands, and in a very childish way, she said, "Thank you, Hashem, for waking me up, giving me back my neshama, and letting me live another day." And that is the thing that inspires me every day of my life, because if that's her attitude, my God, why can't it be mine? If she can have the impact she does on the world, what can I do? So I've just I've been blessed to have had this experience. So I used to, when she was much younger, I used to wish life had turned out differently for her. I guess in a way it would have been easier had it, but there've been so many joys along the way as well. And so that's what I've got to say.
Thank you very much. And I don't think it's very difficult to talk after that, because it does convey a sense of a person, and the sense of the person being your daughter, and the sense of the fact that there are things that one has to learn from, lessons from everybody, which is what you've brought across. If I can start asking one kind of question, you say that this is the way you've handled her situation, and the Jewish children in the Norwood and Kisharon framework. How does this compare with other children from other faiths, other groups in British society? You're offering something more, or are other groups trying to do the same thing?
I think there are. I mean, it's interesting actually, because the world has changed so much in probably the last 40 years. In the way disability was handled, and I think some people have embraced that much quicker than others. So like the people, when I started working in the sector, I just happened to meet a man who I found like incredibly inspiring, doing very inspiring work, and I got really excited by what he was doing, and then modeled what he was doing on what we were doing. And there are pockets of that going on all over England, but there also are people who are very caught up in the old way of care. It's a very subtle difference in the way you manage people. So I always think about it like on a Friday night when we light candles, because my daughter will naturally, when she lights the candles, will if I've got the match in my hand, she'll put her hand over my hand so that she's kind of doing it with me. And I could do it that way and let her light the candle, with me doing the action and her just kind of tokenistically doing it. But I never do. I always take the match and I put it in her hand so she's holding it, and then I gently support her from underneath so that it's her lighting the candle. And that's the subtle difference. And I don't think it's a religious thing. I think it's just where people are caught in time. I mean, I was amazed a few years ago. I went to see one of the old asylums that they used to call them asylums, where they sent mentally handicapped people in those days. And I went to see what it was like, because I had heard that there was a place that had been they were waiting for planning permission on it for so long that it was still in its original condition, and they said there was somebody doing a study on it, and they said it was really interesting, and I took the opportunity to go and have a look, and it was horrifying. I mean, it was a cold winter's day. It was in Liverpool, and there was no electricity, so that like coldness got into your bones. But it was revolting what was there, because there were just these rooms of cots, like with big grates on the side, and in every single room there were these ECV machines, and you could just kind of imagine what went on in this place. But the horrifying thing for me was when I walked out of the building and there was a sign on the wall that said that this place was closed in 1998, and I suddenly had the realization that actually in my daughter's lifetime, that place had actually been open. That's frightening. I mean, that's not that long ago that England's changed a lot. So there are pockets of care which is of ethos, which is just not the same everywhere. I think our community has been particularly good at embracing the change, though, and in reaching out and helping, because I think that's what we do. And the whole chesed side of things of what we do is actually paramount and does help a lot.
How the other question is, how does one encourage the next generation to actually continue that tradition of care? Because I mean, how that's a challenge which you must have encountered.
Yeah, I think it is harder. I mean, it's quite interesting, because I think that the youth of today are far more socially conscious than we were, say, growing up. But their social consciousness is about global issues. It's about sustainability and poverty and all these kind of things. And they're often, what we found is that their kind of ways of helping are in a passive form, in a way, an active passive form. So a lot through like supporting social media campaigns, or starting or tweeting, or and they think they're doing good by sort of shouting that way, but not actually doing. So I mean, yeah, it's hard. I mean, we're with disability. I think we're lucky in a way in that we've got like real role models that people can learn from, and but we've got to get people into our services and engaging, but we're a long way from where we need to be, and because I think people are still not necessarily comfortable with disability. One of the interesting campaigns that I read about during lockdown was also that there was an article that sparked it, which was by a support worker who he looks after a chap with autism who's got quite loud and aggressive behavior. And he says when he walks down the road with this young man, he says people largely, go to the other side of the road, or move away from them. Nobody ever approaches them. And he said he thought what came to his mind was that actually what people are experiencing during lockdown and the isolation that they're feeling is how people with disabilities feel for most of their life, and so the campaign became, when lockdown ends, let's all move out of it together, and don't leave anyone behind, kind of thing, which I thought was quite an interesting thought.
It's more than an interesting thought, because the emphasis in the media at the moment is on the pleasure principle in relationship to lockdown, which is very sobering. I mean, is there any information, or do you have any knowledge about how this kind of issue is handled in Israel, and whether there are any parallels, lessons that come from that, learning disabilities and physical disabilities?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very vibrant community at work in Israel, doing all sorts of interesting things. I think a lot of it is about giving people the same opportunities as anybody in the world, any mainstream peer would have. I think that trying to find employment for people with learning disabilities is paramount. It's about giving people a sense of purpose in their day. Very much the same as for all of us. And it's when you start to achieve that, that everything comes around. The one thing that's difficult, though, is that sometimes you can't really compare things from different countries because of the different way the social care system works and the different infrastructure funding. I mean, one thing that's absolutely amazing in Israel is the support they get through the army, and the people who are the army refusers, or even whilst they're in the army are doing community service. So quite a lot of the staffing for the places in Israel are provided through that, so that it's not the same sort of labor intense market. I mean, in the Norwood scenario, like 90% of our cost is all staffing cost. It's so hugely cost intensive to run the services we do, that it's really difficult. I mean, one of the things that I'm passionate about is how do we get to pay staff better. It's a real hard one, because you get paid by commissioners and local authorities who are getting ever decreasing amounts of money. And what you don't want to do as a charity is, if you're taken on looking after somebody for their life, you want to make sure that the money you're getting to do that covers the cost of care, because what you don't want to do is be reliant on charitable funding, because if God forbid the charitable funding went away, you need the service to be self-sustaining. You want to just add the extras in, with the charitable money. So it's a quandary, but that's that's the aim.
That raises the other question is the staff. Where, kind of, what's this staff client ratio, and where do your staff come from? Who are they?
Yeah. That's a completely it's an impossible question to answer, because it's each person will have a package of care that's worked out for their own particular needs. We have some people that require 2-to-1 staffing, almost through the day and night, because their behavior can be so unpredictable and aggressive. So, we do have that. And then some people who need just literally a couple of hours a day just to keep them on the straight and narrow. So that's a difficult one. The staffing, I mean, one of the most interesting things about Norwood is its staffing mix, because people come to the organization from all sorts of walks of life and all sorts of communities. So it's just an eclectic mix of people, really diverse. Most people are there because they really want to help and care. I don't think they would, you can stack supermarket shelves for more money these days than you can get in care. So it's like the people who come usually really want to be there. We I guess I don't know. I don't think from any one particular place that I can. It's a very mixed staffing group. We get sometimes people who have reached sort of the end of their careers and just want to change and will want to come into care work. Just all sorts of really different reasons why people come into it.
The question about how you cope with the local authority changes that you mentioned, and what perhaps we can do about that is a critical issue. I mean, we're always whenever I in another hat raise public health issues about local authorities, I'm told that it competes with the number of swings and the road repairs. So how do you cope with that? How you both with Kisharon and with Norwood?
Yeah, it's I think the best way to manage it is just to try and establish good relationships with them and try and work in a collaborative way as possible. Especially because at the end of the day, it's like a win-win scenario. Because you're solving problems for them, by finding places for people to live and looking after people and that kind of thing. Every now and again, though, we get into loggerheads with the local authority because they're just not paying enough, and the hard part of being a charity, I think, is that they know who we are and what we do, and like I think if we're a commercial organization, if they refuse to pay us for a particular client, we'd say, well, thank you, take the client away, and Norwood's never done that, so they've got used to us doing that, so they don't really believe us when we bark, if that makes sense, and so I think that we are going to have to find, it's always, if you can, what we try and do is find irrefutable evidence. I mean, we're lucky because it's still statutory driven, and there's a legal the Care Act behind it that sits in our favor. So as long as we can prove the need, then it's very easy. I think what the bigger problem of that the community will face and society will face going forward is that the threshold for care is getting higher and higher, as money runs out. And there will be people just on the margins who aren't quite able to live life independently, but who won't qualify for care. Those are the people that I worry about a lot. How we're going to provide for them. Who's going to pick up that whole parcel of work.
I mean, we taking up more time, but there's one question that relates to doctors. Is the question that you presumably most of the diagnoses are made at the pediatric level. to a certain extent.
Yeah, yeah.
And that you move to adulthood. How do you handle the transition to adult from pediatric care to adult care? And the other thing is, are there lessons that you feel that pediatricians need to take on board to improve
Yeah.
diagnosis and care?
I, I, I mean, I think the transition is much more about when people feel safe and secure with somebody who's looked after them and kept hold of them for so long, and moving on. Um, today, the experience in hospitals, especially with admissions, seems a lot better. Quite a lot of the hospitals have the learning disability nurses available now, and provider organizations are good about providing um, um, passports, that will give the main information about care. So that works really well. One of the things that I'm much more aware of that I think is often goes unnoticed or undiagnosed and untreated is that the the fact that so many people with learning disabilities also land up having mental health problems, and that often sort of isn't kind of treated or noted, and we're having to pick it up and then try and find ways to help, and that's quite difficult. So it's just to be on the lookout for that, because I think they tend to go hand in hand.
Right. And the mental health, and you are having to provide the mental health help within.
Yeah, I mean, we've learned to. I mean, we do all sorts of things. We also, because of the age range of the people that we look after. We've got a lot of people that are suffering from dementia now. As well. So it's you're having to become very, very multi-skilled.
Right.
But what's important, especially in those circumstances, is that people stay in the environment that they're comfortable with and know, and you can keep them grounded for far longer, so it's been good for us to have that experience and see how it can work really well.
I think that we're going to let you off now, just to say thank you, and I hope that people who, either those present or those who watch this on YouTube, will agree with my initial judgment and comments about the enormous contribution you've made, and you've explained very clearly to us the key principles, including the very human ones,
Thank you.
of your own family. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been my absolute pleasure to be with you.